I've taught you about the game board, the game card types, how to play the game. Let's talk about the patrons. Hello, it's Icy. I am back with the next video of the series that I am making about the Tales of Tribute, the new in-game card game for the Elder Scrolls Online, coming with the High Isle chapter in 2022. That's a mouthful. Let's talk about the patrons, shall we? So the patrons are the decks, suits, groups of cards that are available to play the Tales of Tribute. Each player will pick two, and those decks will be combined to create a shared deck that everybody draws from. If you are playing an NPC, they will pick the first and second deck, and you'll pick the third and fourth. If you're playing a person, the first player picks the first and fourth deck, and the second player picks the second and third deck. So there are 8 decks, as you can see here. The top 4 are novice decks. They're the decks that you start with initially, and they're the decks that novice NPCs that you play will have available to them. As you move up to intermediate NPCs, they'll play with the Enzyme, Fronda, Hundig deck and the Red Eagle deck as well, and expert NPCs will play with all of them, including the Sorcery King, Organum, and Rajin, the Purging Liar, as well. If you are a person, you will unlock these additional 4 decks across the bottom row by exploring the world of Tamriel, doing quests through the High Isle chapter, killing bosses, doing things. Right now on PTS, if you create a top-level character, you can unlock all of these decks and explore and play with them. But in the real world, you will need to explore the world instead and find them that way. So let's talk about each of the individual patrons and their patron ability that you can activate during the game. Now, St. Palin, this deck is focused on power generation, so kind of power that gets converted to winning points, and also defense as well. There's an additional layer in this of preventing your opponent from transferring their power into winning points. It's a very effective deck, well worth experimenting with and learning how to play. And its activation is pretty helpful. Pay 2 power and have an agent card in your cooldown move to the top of your draw pile. So you have to have an agent card in your cooldown to activate this, and yeah, it moves it to the top of the draw pile, so you know that you're getting an agent that can be played in your next turn. That can be very helpful, especially as the St. Palin does have quite a lot of agents to draw on. They're all quite high cost, but if you can keep those in play, it really will be effective. It's the same skill for all, but it does mean that basically each time you activate it, it might move from unfavored to neutral to favored, or up and down basically, as either player activates the skill. And that goes for most of the other patron abilities. So then we have the Grandmaster Delmin Hlalu, and this has a focus on acquiring cards, sometimes for free, and acquiring gold. So, and the idea for this deck is you're actually going to specifically use this patron's ability along with what the cards can do. So for example, many of the combos for the higher cost cards will actually just allow you to select an additional free card from the tavern. And then the idea is you take the free card, when it comes back around again in your deck, then you sacrifice it using this particular patron skill. Sacrifice 1 card in your own play that cost 1 or more gold and gain prestige equal to the card's cost -1. The idea is you want to be sacrificing regularly, that's generating you winning points, and you can win this way. This is a very effective strategy against NPCs. If you're playing an NPC, probably take this one and you should be right to win most of them. The NPC AIs are getting smarter though, so do keep do keep that in mind. So next up is the Duke of Crows. This has a focus on generating gold, drawing extra cards from the deck, and large numbers of agents. So flocks of crows in play to generate very high combos. This particular deck benefits mostly from being a solo deck. You might combine it with, for example, the Hullo deck, which gives you extra gold as well, but it does actually benefit from being fairly stripped down and mostly purple cards. So it's got a very interesting patron ability, and it's an important one, and one you should keep in mind. So the ability is, if you are unfavored or neutral, pay all of your gold and gain power equal to your gold paid -1. Don't use this at the start of the game if you have something else to spend your money on, for real, because once you've used this and the crow favors you, you can't use it again until your opponent does. What that means is, if you use this early and your opponent saves it, it means your opponent has a way of, for example, generating a whole bunch of gold towards the end of the match and then suddenly getting a whole bunch of victory points that you have no counter for. So I would recommend that you save the crow as an execute ability for the end of the match. And if your opponent uses it early, don't free it up again until you're ready to use it right at the end. So then we have the Sigic Law Master Solaris. This particular deck has a focus on selecting cards and cycling through them. So for example, removing, looking at the top of your draw pile, selecting which cards out of that you want to move to the cooldown, which means that you've got a higher chance of getting cards that you can use for a combo, for example. It has a very important counter to some of the other decks though. The Tribute, the Patron ability. Your opponent has an agent and you can pay 4 gold to knock it out and move it to the cooldown pile. So this is something that you would very much consider taking, this particular patron. If, for example, somebody used the St. Palin patron, you would consider taking this one as a counter. I'm not fond of the actual base cards in this deck necessarily. They're hard to play, hard to generate prestige through as well. You would use this deck in a combo with something else, but its patron ability is very good. So, and then we move on to the extra decks. So the Enzyme Fronda Hundig, like the other Enzyme, this deck has a focus on flexibility. So when you play a card, you'll be given a choice of 2 things you can do. One is always generate some level of power, and the second one is a range of different abilities that are actually pulled from the other decks. For example, take a card from the tavern, generate gold, look at cards in your draw pile. So they do a whole heap of different sorts of things. It's a very flexible deck. It's a great one to have. It in combination with one of the others is great. Feels a little overpowered, so let's see what happens. However, its patron ability is not great. It's fine, but nothing particularly special. Pay 2 power, get a gold. If the agent favors you, you automatically get a gold each turn without having to pay additional power. This is helpful early in the game while you're still purchasing cards. Later, it's not particularly useful. The other thing I'd say is try not to get into a bidding war with paying 2 power back and forth in order to get just 1 gold. It's probably not worth it. Just evaluate whether you want to keep having this patron, like if you need to keep paying for this patron to like you. So then we move on to the Red Eagle, King of the Reach. So this is an interesting deck as well. Its focus is very much on destroying unneeded cards to minimize the deck size. So many of the cards are destroy up to 2 cards in your hand and remove them from play. Destroy 1 card. remove cards from the tavern, a whole heap of things. Many of these cards are also contract actions, so they play immediately and then they don't go into your deck afterwards. There are some extraordinarily strong, powerful power generating cards in this deck. So if you can get those into your hand, strip out all of the other cards, just keep bringing those back and comboing them, then that's a really effective way to win. It's a bit risky and it relies on you getting those really good power generation cards, but it is definitely something that can work for you. So the skill for this one is helpful, actually. It's one that can be used by any of the other patrons, and for any of them, pay 2 power, draw a card. This is useful because maybe you've gotten part of a combo down, but there's a further combo you could activate. If only you had one more card of that color, you might consider using 2 power in order to generate that. Or, for example, there's a fantastic card in the tavern that you really, really want, or you really want to deny the other player the access to, but you need 1 more gold. Another reason why you might consider using the Red Eagle activation as well. Then we have the Sorcerer King Organum, and his focus is on generating large numbers of cards, and lots, like a huge hand size, as well as direct prestige generation. It doesn't even matter whether those cards are Sea Elf focused. I mean, it helps, but really it's about the hand size, as long as you're combining it with this activation, which is pay 3 gold, and then, depending on where you are, for example, neutral, pay 3 gold, and for every 6 cards that you have in your hand, not just in your hand, but your whole deck that you're generating, you get a power rounded down. If you're favored, it's for every 4 cards you get a power, and you get a Malma boarding party. When they come back around again, they'll just give you 2 straight prestige, but they're also contributing to the number of cards you hold. So the more you use this one, the better it gets. One thing I would say is that the NPCs can play this one. They can play it very effectively. It's a very straightforward way of playing the game. So if you're playing an NPC, probably I'd suggest you don't give them, like, don't pick this one as a patron against an NPC. The NPCs can actually play this one. So, and the NPC AIs are getting better. Just putting that out there. Finally, we have Rajin the Purring Liar. So there's a very interesting deck. It's got a focus on gold generation, which is helpful, but also on negative effects. There are a number of cards that will just steal prestige from the other player. It's a good counter, for example, for the Sea Elf deck, or an acceptable counter. It does work well combined with, for example, another gold generation deck. So the Duke of Crows or the Hlalu deck is another option to combine this with. But yeah, it's something you should certainly consider taking if an opponent is picking either a power generation option or just a straight up prestige option. The activation skill for this one is not the best. In fact, I would suggest that this is the least useful out of any of them. Pay 3 gold, get a bewilderment card, and it goes into your opponent's deck. A bewilderment card is just, it doesn't do anything. Its only negative effect is that if you've got it in your hand, it automatically gets played, and it means you've only got 4 cards left to do anything with. That's 20% of your power, so to speak. It's 20% of the things you can do, so that's a disadvantage. But if you get that, there are ways to remove that card from the game. All of the multiple of the reach cards can remove cards, but additionally there is also the treasury, which I haven't shown here, but it appears with the patrons, and you can always activate that, and it can transform any card in your hand into a writ of coin, which is worth 2 gold. That itself is probably a more useful thing to do rather than spend 3 gold on a bewilderment. There might be times where you go, actually, I can't do anything else, I'm just going to do this. Or, of course, the other reason you might want a patron to favor you is because you are going for a win strategy that involves all 4 patrons liking you. Do remember that you don't just have to get to 40 points, you can instead, even if you're losing on points, have all the patrons like you and you will automatically win. That is a reason, of course, to activate any of the patrons, but I would suggest that Rajin's patron ability is the least useful out of any of them. It's, yeah, I can't necessarily see that it's a great one. But if you disagree and you think Rajin the Purring Liar is the bee's knees or the cat's whiskers, let me know in the comments below. Can I tell you about any other aspects of this game? If you've got suggestions or questions, let me know as well. There are some more videos coming for this series. Likely there'll be one about how the competitive play will work, which has only just come to the PTS. And also there is still the deep dive on strategy for the patrons and the other stuff. I've talked about a little bit of that today, so it gives you an idea of the sorts of things I've been thinking about and experimenting with. But yeah, that'll be it's gonna take a while to put together. But thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Come follow me over on twitch.tv/ICYIC, where I will be playing Tales of Tribute and getting salty a bit. Just a bit. Just a bit. But I would love to see you there. Thank you. And oh, please do subscribe here if you haven't. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.